children, and welcome back to Storytime with Mrs Davies. So we're carrying on with our book, George's Marvellous Medicine. I received a lovely letter from somebody in Sweet Chestnut class asking if I'd carry on with the video so we could find out what happened at the end of George's Marvellous Medicine. So here we go. Now, if you remember last time, George had given Grandma the medicine finally, hadn't he? And she had had all sorts of reactions. She'd whizzed up in the air, done a somersault, she'd puffed up and then deflated, and finally she'd grown taller and taller and gone right through the roof. And then, to prove that it was the medicine, George gave it to a hen as well, didn't he? He gave it to a chicken, and that grew huge as well, but not as big as Grandma. So, the next chapter is called The Pig, the Bullocks, the Sheep, the Pony and the Nanny Goat. Oh my goodness. And lots of you, if I remember, had some really good ideas about what this chapter might be about. At that moment, George's mother came back from shopping in the village. She drove her car into the yard and got out. She was carrying a bottle of milk in one hand and a bag of groceries in the other. I'd forgotten about George's parents. The first thing she saw was the gigantic brown hen towering over little George. She dropped the bottle of milk. Then Grandma started shouting at her from the rooftop, and when she looked up and saw Grandma's head sticking up through the tiles, she dropped the bag of groceries. "How about that then, eh, Mary?" Grandma shouted. "I'll bet you've never seen a hen as big as that. That's George's giant hen, that is." But, stammered George's mother. "It's George's magic medicine," Grandma shouted. "We've both had it, the hen and I." "But how in the world did you get up on the roof?" cried Mother. "I didn't," cackled the old woman. "My feet are still standing on the floor in the living room." This was just too much for George's mother to understand. She just goggled and gaped. She looked as though she was going to faint. A second later, George's father appeared. His name was Killy Cranky. Mr. Cranky was a small man with bandy legs and a huge head. He was a kind father to George, but he was not an easy person to live with because even the smallest of things got him all worked up and excited. The hen standing in the yard was certainly not a small thing, and when Mr. Cranky saw it, he started jumping about as though something was burning his feet. "Great heavens!" he cried, waving his arms. "What's this? What's happened? Where did it come from? It's a giant hen. Who did it?" "I did," George said. "Look at me!" Grandma shouted from the rooftop. "Never mind about the hen. What about me?" Mr. Cranky looked up and saw Grandma. "Be quiet, Grandma," he said. It didn't seem to surprise him that the old girl was sticking up through the roof. It was the hen that excited him. He had never seen anything like it. But then, who had? "It's fantastic," Mr. Cranky shouted, dancing round and round. "It's colossal. It's gigantic. It's tremendous. It's a miracle. How did you do it, George?" George started telling his father about the magic medicine. While he was doing this, the big brown hen sat down in the middle of the yard and went cluck, 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 cluck. Everyone stared at it. When it stood up again, there was a brown egg lying there. The egg was the size of a football. Oh my goodness, children, imagine an egg the size of a football. "That egg would make scrambled eggs for 20 people, Mrs. Cranky said. "George," Mr. Cranky shouted, "how much of this medicine have you got?" "Lots," George said. "There's a big saucepan full in the kitchen, and this bottle's here's nearly full as well." "Come with me," Mr. Cranky yelled, grabbing George by the arm. "Bring the medicine. For years and years I've been trying to breed bigger and bigger animals. Bigger bulls for beef, bigger pigs for pork, bigger sheep for mutton. They went to the pigsty first. George gave a spoonful of medicine to the pig. The pig blew smoke from its nose and jumped about all over the place. Then it grew and grew. In the end, it looked like this. They went to the herd of fine black bullocks that Mr. Cranky was trying to fatten for the market. George gave each of them some medicine, and this is what happened, children. Oh my goodness. Look at those. Oh, I can see the smoke coming out of their noses as well. Then the sheep. He gave some to his grey pony, Jack Frost. And finally, just for fun, he gave some to Elma, the nanny goat. Oh my goodness, look at Elma. She's huge. Next chapter, children. A crane for Grandma. Grandma, from high up on the rooftop, could see everything that was going on, and she didn't like what she saw. She wanted to be the centre of attention, and nobody was taking the slightest notice of her. George and Mr. Cranky were running around and getting excited about the enormous animals. Mrs. Cranky was washing up in the kitchen, and Grandma was all alone on the rooftop. "Hey, you!" she yelled. "George, get me a cup of tea this minute, you idle little beast." Oh my goodness, I thought Grandma had got a bit nicer, children. "Don't listen to the old goat," Mr. Cranky said. "She's stuck where she is, and a good thing too." "But we can't leave her up there, Dad," George said. "What if it rains?" "George!" Grandma yelled. "Oh, you horrible little boy! You disgusting little worm! Fetch me a cup of tea at once and a slice of currant cake." "We'll have to get her out, Dad," George said. "She won't give us any peace if we don't." Mrs. Cranky came outside and she agreed with George. "She's my mother," she said. "She's a pain in the neck," Mr. Cranky said. "I don't care," Mrs. Cranky said. "I'm not leaving my own mother sticking up through the roof for the rest of her life." So, in the end, Mr. Cranky telephoned the crane company and asked them to send their biggest crane over to the house at once. The crane arrived 1 hour later. It was on wheels and there were 2 men inside it. The crane men climbed up onto the roof and put the ropes under Grandma's arms. Then she was lifted up right through the roof. In a way, the medicine had done Grandma good. It had made her less grumpy. Oh, it had not made her less grumpy or bad-tempered, but it seemed to have cured all her aches and pains, and she was suddenly as frisky as a ferret. As soon as the crane had lowered her to the ground, she jumped over to George's huge pony, Jack Frost, and jumped onto his back. This ancient old hag, who was now as tall as a house, then galloped about the farm on the gigantic pony, jumping over trees and sheds and shouting, "Out of my way! Clear the decks! Stand back, all you miserable midgets, or I'll trample you to death!" and other silly things like that. Oh my goodness, I bet that was a real sight to see, children. A huge, gigantic grandma on a huge, gigantic pony. But because Grandma was now much too tall to get back into the house, she had to sleep that night in the hay barn with the mice and the rats. Oh dear, that doesn't sound very nice, children, does it? Okay, we'll have part of the next chapter. So it's called Mr. Cranky's Great Idea. The next day, George's father came down to breakfast in a state of greater excitement than ever. "I've been awake all night thinking about it," he cried. "About what, Dad?" George asked him. "About your marvellous medicine, of course. We can't stop now, my boy. We must start making more of it at once. More and more and more." The giant saucepan had been completely emptied the day before because there had been so many sheep and pigs and cows and bullocks to be dosed. "But why do we need more, Dad?" George asked. "We've done all our own animals. We've made Grandma feel as frisky as a ferret, even though she does have to sleep in the barn." "My dear boy," cried Mr. Killy Cranky, "we need barrels and barrels of it. tons and tons. Then we will sell it to every farmer in the world so that all of them can have giant animals. We will build a marvellous medicine factory and sell the stuff in bottles at £5 a time. We will become rich and you will become famous. Oh, that sounds exciting, children. What do you think? Okay, we'll leave it there for today and we'll find out more about Mr. Cranky's great idea when we come back next time. See you all soon. Stay safe, everyone. Bye.